Hey, James here with Ascension Digital. I had a lot of fun making a music video for Sunlounger. Yes, Sunlounger. He's like an international composer, and he allowed me to make a music video on spec for him, and I did all kinds of cool stuff cinematically. Let's go take a look at how I made the video, and I'm going to teach you what I did in Final Cut Pro X. So this is basic to intermediate editing in Final Cut Pro X. Let's go take a look. Welcome everybody to my desktop. The first thing I want to do is talk about all the different files it took to make that music video. And if you haven't seen the music video, here's a link. Check it out. If you're a big fan of Sunlounger, their stuff is really cool. Roger Shaw is an amazing composer. He's done work for dozens, maybe even hundreds of feature films, including Lion King being one of the latest ones. These are the files here from his music video. Hopefully you've gotten a chance to watch it. There's a lot of time-lapse photography and a lot of beach and flowing scenes on there. I'm going to talk about how to do those scenes, also how to edit that kind of work in Final Cut Pro X. So let's get started. The first thing I have is, here's a sample of some of the time-lapse segments that I did. This one is in San Ramon, California at a golf course. This one here is in San Ramon also on the top of a hill, kind of like during sunset hour. Here's the Golden Gate Bridge as the sun goes down. Most of these still images were photographed on a Fuji X-T3. So these images were around 6K. And then here's some more cloud formations in a golf course in San Ramon. Here's another angle there. So these are kind of low cloud formations, probably just maybe 2,000, 3,000 feet up. All right, so let's see how this was done in the camera, and I'll step you through what to do. First of all, you need to know how to set up your camera for time-lapse photography. What I did with the X-T3 on the Fuji was I set it to photograph every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds it was taking a still image at 6K resolution. So if you look here, that's the Golden Gate Bridge and it's a still photo. And then you go to the next image and the sun is slowly moving down. And if you really want the images to be perfect, you can use the raw images. It's just a ton more processing. I was comfortable using the JPEGs. So let's open up Final Cut Pro and see what I did. So let's take a look at how this is done step by step. You'll start a new project. There. And we'll just call this test. Then I'm going to set the size to what I'm editing in. I'm going to set it to 4K. And I'm going to do a custom size here. Let's do a custom size. So here we have the anamorphic perspective of our video. And then we're going to take the photos and we're going to take all of them to the very end here by clicking the first one and then holding Shift and clicking the last one. That basically takes all of our photos and we can put them all on the timeline. As you can see here, the photos are 6K in quality and we're on a 4K timeline, but the images are square. We're going to have to resize all of these images. What we'll want to do is click on one and go to this area here where the film strip is and resize the photo. So what we'll have to do is set the framing for where this Golden Gate Bridge is. We're going to go right here and drop it down by going negative. All right, so we're negative 300 pixels down, and now we've got to do this for highlight all of them and set that frame. And like our first one, we made this 170% larger. We're going to do that for all of them. Highlight all of them and go to 170, or you can manually type it in. Okay, the second problem is every frame is going to be like 10 seconds long, and we don't want that. That's not going to play through like it's in motion. So what we need to do is take all the duration down on all these still images. Instead of it being 10 seconds long, we want it to only be one frame. So that's one frame instead of, you know, hundreds of frames across. So we'll highlight them all, and we'll right click and change the duration and just click in 1. So now what it's done is it's taken hundreds of our photos and shrunk them down to being one frame. Let's zoom in. You hit the Command key and the plus key, and we're going to zoom in a little bit to the timeline. So now every single still image is only one frame. Now Final Cut renders this pretty quickly. It's pretty amazing. If we hit the spacebar to play this back, we're going to see that every photograph is one frame, and now we actually have a motion picture sequence from photographs. And there it is. You can repeat this pattern for all the other time-lapse images by making them into a single frame with duration of being one frame, and resize them to fit your workspace so that everything is in the perspective that you want it to be. And that's basically what I've done here with all of these other edits. I'm going to move to the top. These are still photographs that are in motion now because the 100 or 200 frames that I took are being played back one frame at a time. Here's the other one. So what we have is this high-speed cloud movement sequence that I used in the music video. Now we can export these files by hitting this button and creating a master file and creating it in 4K at ProRes quality, and that is where I save these here under composites. And as you can see, they are 4K quality renders from still photographs, but are playing in motion. All right, and here's the next one. And here's the Golden Gate one. All right, so as you can see, still photography becomes motion picture. Okay, so let's take a look at how we edited the rest of the video and how I set up the camera and some of the footage to make sure that we're doing the best video that we can with the footage that we have. The first thing I did is I organized all the footage. We did maybe a 3-day shoot with the singer and with Roger Shaw. And there was also some B-roll footage of San Francisco, the beach, water, the waves, things like that. What I did is I put all the footage of each day into a folder. This is day 1. And these are scenes shot and filmed at the Palace of Fine Arts. This is done on a small slider that's maybe about 2 or 3 feet across. They're a lot of fun, and they really make the scene look dynamic. I'll tell you, it was cold that day. I think it was May, but really it was probably 40-something degrees outside. We were all freezing. What I did is I filmed everything in log in Fuji. The X-T3 has a pretty amazing flat color profile in it that I really like. I think the color science is excellent on this camera. Everything was shot at 4K DCI at 60 frames. Pretty much everything I shot was at 60 frames. Even though I was editing the music video at 24 frames, I shot everything at an overcrank speed of 60 frames in case I wanted some slow motion segments in the music video. Here's some additional scenes that we did not use. We had so much footage, a lot of it didn't even get used. Ideally, what you want to do is film the B-roll, take another day to film the singing part. And what we did is we just had her indoors. I didn't shoot a lot of I didn't set the indoor scenes to log just because there wasn't a drastic amount of color and brightness difference inside the hotel that she was at. We just put up some basic LED lights and filmed in the cinema mode. In some of these scenes, I just filmed in the flat cinema profile of the Fuji X-T3 and not the F-Log. Just because there wasn't really a need to do that, because there wasn't a huge color contrast in the hotel. There wasn't bright sun or drastic changes in color. But outside, where there was bright sun and waves and things like that, I went ahead and filmed in the Fuji F-Log. Some of these shots were done handheld, but I was expecting to slow motion most of these scenes, and we only used very short segments. The footage was fairly smooth going handheld because of the high frame rate. And at the end of day one, we had some nighttime scenes with the Bay Bridge behind us and some small LED lights to just kind of fill in the darkness so that we can see her. Again, this was not filmed in the Fuji F-Log just because there wasn't drastic sun and contrast differences in the light. And there's some drone shots of San Francisco. Most of it did not get used. I did shoot this scene here, and we did use some of these scenes here. And then we have some lens flares. I'm going to go ahead and put a link below for these lens flares. These were added in to improve the look of the video because I did not use an anamorphic lens, but adding the flares in makes it look like we did. Let's open the timeline and take a look at the rest of the edit. The first thing I did was I set the perspective of what size the video would be. Then I went ahead and put the music on the timeline first and made sure the audio levels were peaking right at 0. We don't want them to go above 0, but right at the highest part of the song, they need to just touch the 0 line. And if you watch the video, there's a couple scenes here where the music just grazes the top of that, and that's what you want. You don't want to go above 0. The second thing I did is I took all the different scenes that we filmed at different locations and I synchronized them to the audio track. The scene of her singing in the hotel room, the scene of her singing on the beach, the scene of her singing at different angles were all stacked on top of each other. Once you have every scene and her lip syncing matching the music track, you can then go and become more creative with which angle and which location that you want to show in your edit. That would be pretty much step one, getting every location synchronized to the music. The next thing I did is went ahead and finished a basic edit with her singing. This is all the different locations, and I did a basic edit of what I felt was appropriate to show in that moment of the lyrics. There's some parts of the song where she's not singing and it's just music, and that's where we cut in the extra footage that you see on this upper level here. These B-roll scenes on the beach, of her glancing in the distance, these scenes of her blending in, and these scenes with Roger drawing in the sand. There's also scenes over here that we added in when there's music and there's no lyrics. So all these B-roll scenes are patched into areas generally where there's not a lot of lyrics and we want to show something going on. I'm going to step you through a few of how these scenes were done and what we did to make them look the way they did. And then here, the lens flares are added to the scenes where the sun is directly going into the lens. And what I did is I moved the lens flare up to match the sun. And then wherever the sun was behind the bridge, there was no lens flares. And then here again, there's lens flares as the sun is coming over the clouds. And here again between the leaves. There's some additional lens flares here that you're seeing built into the lens already, and then some of these other ones here are synthetically added. Let's go back to the beginning. Once I've selected the scenes of her singing, then the scenes of the B-roll segments that were filmed, you can always use your own creative ideas and blend scenes together by placing them on top of each other and clicking on the top scene and choosing this option here. This option is overlay, which means that you're blending the two scenes together so that you see them both. And then some of these scenes here have been color corrected to have that dreamy sepia look where the color looks like it's classic from her memories years ago. And a lot of that can be done by clicking on the scene and going here and choosing different color options, or going up here and color correcting the scene the way you feel would be appropriate. A lot of these scenes were kind of bright and I had to bring the brightness down. And you can always also pull up your scopes by hitting the Command key and the number 7 and just kind of check the levels of how bright certain things are. Some of these scenes were extremely bright and they were just over the peak and they were brought down quite a bit. Especially with the sun. Some of those scenes are brought down. And blending these scenes, as I mentioned, is pretty easy. We can just put one scene on top of the other and go over here to the film strip, and you can multiply the scenes together, or you can add them or do overlay. And there's all kinds of great options in here for blending different scenes and making the look that I made or looks that you might prefer. There's some scenes up here in the later part of the video. Here's the scene we showed earlier with the slider. And then some additional scenes with the sun rising in the background. These are the time-lapse photography scenes that we used and I showed you earlier. These beach scenes are being blended in with the hotel, which gives you this really nice look because this was some orange light from a lamp in the room, but it just blends right into the scene, adding color to a beach which was actually very, very flat and kind of gray. It was a very cloudy day. And some of these transitions in here, let's zoom in that a little bit. These transitions between the scenes are just different transitions that are already built into Final Cut Pro X. If you look for them right here under transitions, you can look at these static transitions and things like that, which were used right here. Okay, let's put this away. These scenes here, where she's throwing the rock into the ocean, they were all shot at 60 frames and slowed down by 40%. What I did is I went over here to the speed and I slowed them down custom to 40%. 60 frames slowed down to 24 frames on a timeline is 40% speed. Giving you that soft and smooth look, which looks really nice also with the ocean waves splashing in the background. Most of these scenes are in slow motion. Now here, what I did is I started, let's zoom in a little closer. This little scene right here of the sunset was sped up probably 8 times the speed. and then here it's playing back at normal speed. You can do these little speed changes, and then the lens flare has been added in manually for this sun until it goes right under the cloud. Once it goes under the cloud, you really don't need any lens flares. And then what I did here is this was a nighttime scene driving over the Bay Bridge, filmed on the Lumix GH5. And then I just put the sunset on top of it, and I blended that in by going here to the lightning mode. Like I said, there's all these different modes for blending different scenes together, and you can try them out to see what fits your particular artistic, style. But this was actually a sunset blended in with the nighttime scene on the bridge. Same here. And this was done with a close-up of the moon. This scene was actually filmed. It was with a 135mm lens on the GH5, which pretty much puts you into over 250mm, giving you a very good close-up of the moon. If you ever want to get a close-up of the moon or close-up of something, you can use the GH5 because the chip is so small. Any 150 or 200mm lens on there will really give you amazing close-ups of the moon. And these are just other scenes where I focused on traffic and I pulled the lens all the way in the opposite direction, making things really out of focus. And again here, some over cranking with the flag. The flag is playing at regular speed here, and then slowed down to 40% speed here, just so you can read the San Francisco name on there. These scenes were surprisingly easy to do. I just held the camera against my chest and stood up slowly from a squatted position. So a lot of these scenes can be done without heavy equipment as long as you're very steady and you're shooting at a higher frame rate, 60 frames or 120 frames. I wasn't able to shoot more than 60 frames because that was the maximum frame rate at 4K for this particular camera. And what we did here was we went ahead and spotlighted her and got this scene ready by lighting things up, because this was a very dark scene. This scene here is actually from a little bit different location, but it's hard to tell because we're filming downward now. And there's Roger in the background. These gimbal shots were filmed on the GH5. We just pretty much floated the camera around on a gimbal. And here's a little bit different look. This is not the similar slow motion look as the rest of the footage. I filmed this in 24 frames, and then I slowed it down by half, giving you this kind of 12-frame choppy slow motion feel. Much different than the slow motion feel you get when shooting at 60 frames like this footage here. Very smooth when it plays back. But if you do not set the camera to 60 frames, you're going to get this kind of look, which is a little more choppy and dramatic. It's slow motion, but it looks almost like stuttery and kind of stroby. Almost surreal, and that is a particular look that some people like, and they purposely shoot at 24 frames and then slow it down by half to give you that look. Here's a scene right below the Golden Gate Bridge where I filmed at 60 frames, and I let it play back in its original speed. And then right at this point here, when the waves crashed, I slowed it down to 40%. The rest of these scenes are pretty much her finishing up her singing in the hotel room, and the sunset pictures coming up. And here is the scene that we did with the still images from the X-T3. These were the images that were taken every 2 seconds, And I think this scene took a good hour. The camera sat there for at least an hour as the sun went down. And then I put this scene into this edit and I reversed it, making it seem like the sun is rising again. And then this lens flare has been added in to move along with the rising of the sun, to give you that kind of anamorphic lens flare look. And then as the sun goes behind the bridge, the lens flares are faded out and then put back in once the sun is rising again. Same here, the lens flares have been added in and the cloud formations are playing back. More lens flares. And this was a drone shot in the valley. And again, some cloud scenes with the sun rising again and things being brighter. And we finalize the video with Roger drawing in the sand. And then right here, I slow it down to 40% speed. And we are done with the video. And my signature comes up. I hope you liked this video. I really appreciate that you joined me today. If you can, share this with other people. Hit the like button. Hit subscribe and ring the notification bell because I'm going to produce tons of educational videos about cinematography and I'd like to share them with you. See you next time.